When God weakens you, it is for your own benefit. And it may even be for the benefit of those that are affected by your presence. Look, when I say we, I mean we believers, often want empowerment. We don't seek power to rule over others because we are freed from that. I'm talking to you who is delivered. We don't want power to show off. We want power to make it through. We want power to overcome stuff. We just want the success of overcoming. And there is nothing wrong with that. However, there are times that the Lord will weaken you. And when this happens, it will appear as if it's Satan bringing you down. Sometimes the Lord will allow the enemy to overtake one area around you. Why? Not because the Lord is in agreement with the enemy, but the Lord can even use what the enemy is doing against you to accomplish his purpose in you. Alright, I'm going to give an illustration now, as I often do. I've given the data, now comes the illustration. If needed, I will make 2 illustrations. Look, let's say you have Gemma. Gemma is in her 20s. She's living in a kind of messed up neighborhood. There is drug dealing. There are some of those men that have loose hands towards women. And from time to time, there are people being shot or stabbed. Now, Gemma does not have the money, nor does she has a job, but she doesn't work enough hours to save money to move to another neighborhood. So what does Gemma do? Gemma one day decides she's going to walk with a knife. And she even talks with friends about it. Some of her friends tell her, Gemma, you walking around with a knife, that's not a good idea. Gemma made plain, listen, Susie. Let's pretend her friend's name is Susie. When I'm walking down the streets, I'm the one walking there. I can't depend upon the cops because if I need to call them, it will take a while. And if there's a guy or a woman doing stupid in front of me, I need to act right then. Other people try to convince Gemma. Gemma, it's not a good idea to walk around with a weapon, but Gemma said, I need this empowerment. And look, the next day, Gemma buys a very sharp knife that she can seal off well, and she walks around with it. Normally, she would walk around a supermarket, because at a supermarket you would often have those people hanging around that have no business being around there. So she would just walk around to go to the subway. Now, today she just walks near the supermarket. So there are people looking strange at her, and she keeps on walking. One day, someone tries to walk after her, and she went into the attack mode. And that guy backed off, he ran away. Since then, she isn't avoiding places anymore. She's just walking around, dressed in nice clothes. She feels safe, she's empowered, and indeed, nobody's bothering her. When they see her, they just move on. But here's another thing that has happened since then that Gemma is not aware of. A local police officer has put her on a watch list, and she's not aware of it. About a year later, Gemma hears people talk about her, whispering about her, near the metro station. When the people notice that she's passing by, they stop, and one of them moves away. One of the people that were whispering about her then asks her, "You're Gemma, right?" And she asks them, she asks the individual, "How do you know my name? Who are you?" Then she explains, "Well, people are talking about you around here." Talking about what? Gemma was thinking to herself, "I go to work and I meet with some friends in other cities. I'm not even hanging around in this neighborhood. When I need to go to the supermarket or to the mall, I do that. When I need to do what I need to do, I do it. I don't bother other people. I don't even talk with other people in this neighborhood." Then the other individual explains to Gemma, "Gemma, haven't you heard that that people have been robbed lately? That people have been stabbed, and some women were even assaulted?" Gemma said, "Well, that can be true, but I don't really follow the news that much. I'm often at work." The individual says, "Gemma, almost nobody walks around late at night near the mall or through town, through this neighborhood at all. But you do. And a lot of people thought it was kind of strange that you are walking around like that and nobody bothers you. Anyone else that would imitate you would get in trouble. So people began to suspect that you are on the side of the criminals." And then Gemma was thinking, "Woman, you are out of your mind." And then the woman asked Gemma, "Gemma, you have this Indian guy that has his own spice shop over there. He greets you when he sees you." Gemma says, "Well, he's being kind. What's the problem with it?" Then the woman tells Gemma, "Gemma, there was a time that some thugs came to his store and they wanted to beat him up, but those thugs saw you walking into the store and they immediately just left. And the thugs were saying things like, 'No, no, no, not with her around, not with her around.' The thugs show a kind of respect towards you." And this Indian guy, when he gave a report to the police, he reported this. And the police officers that took the report thought it was kind of strange that four muscled men who were about to commit a robbery and even assault the shop owner, that they just left when you entered the place. And you are kind of a small woman with very light muscles, with a very high voice. So the police officers were kind of, I would say, they were kind of alarmed by it. And more people in the neighborhood began to think that you may have something to do with those criminals. So tell me, are you part of some gang, or are you involved with some gangster that you basically get away with being careless?" Gemma suddenly decides that the conversation has become quite uncomfortable, and she says, "Oh, look, I need to go to work. I'll talk to you later." Now, this was just one parable, but what happened here? Gemma lived in that neighborhood, and she faced the same issues as everyone else in the neighborhood, and she wanted empowerment. And in her own understanding, she thought, if I have a weapon, then the dogs will realize, "Oh, you're not going to mess around here." And indeed, her understanding is factual. When you have got a weapon, they that don't have a weapon are going to back off. So she had, her understanding was factual, but she had a short vision, in a sense that she didn't look at the big picture. Now, a woman with a weapon that also is willingly to attack, well, that scared the dogs, and the dogs talked about it. But here's the thing, Gemma never thought about that if she would become so courageous to walk around on the street at night. She never thought that people would begin to associate her with the criminality that's bothering and plaguing the neighborhood. Because just think about it from the perspective of the people in the neighborhood. You have this young woman, let's say she's around 26 years old. She's small, she's thin, she has a high voice also, so she's quite vulnerable. And you have women taller than her, with more muscles than her. They're the ones who tend to avoid certain places. But then you have this small woman, even at night, when she comes out of work, sometimes she would hang out with friends at the work before coming home, and she walks around as if there's nothing going on. And there are dogs at night, there are muggers at night seeing her, and they're walking away. Well, if someone else would be there, even people that are trained or are capable of fighting, they're assaulted. Now, if those people would see this, of course they may think, what's Gemma's role in this? So Gemma became kind of infamous without her being aware of it. This was a consequence she didn't foresee. And it was then that Gemma began to realize that, hold on a minute, her friends were telling her the truth. That wearing a weapon is not such a good idea. Okay, so let's go to another parable now. We have this guy, I'm going to use a male example now, let's call him James. James, he is respected by the community, nobody's bullying him, nobody's picking on him, but he realizes that people tend to be quite self-centered, and James never wanted to face any situation in which he would become financially dependent upon others. So James was a hard worker, really hard worker. But then one day, his boss came and his boss told him, James, I'm going to close this store. I'm going bankrupt. I'm sorry. James immediately applied for 19 other jobs. And James got a part-time job somewhere else. But he had to move to another apartment because he couldn't pay the rent based upon his new job. He had to live with an old classmate. And he hated it. He hated he had to live with someone else. The old classmate was a good friend of his, and he treated him with hospitality and kindness. And the old classmate even told him, James, if you can't pay rent, if you can't help me paying rent for the first half year, I don't mind. Just stay here, rebuild yourself till we find another place. That classmate himself was often away for work. Sometimes he would stay away for weekends. So James was very frustrated. James was thinking, oh Lord, why did this happen to me? Lord, why didn't you warn me before? Why did you, oh man. So James was really frustrated. But then, later, James got a phone call from an uncle. And the uncle was just chatting with him. He hadn't seen the uncle for years. But then, after he hung up the phone, someone else called him. This was a cousin of his, a distant cousin. And that cousin warned him about his uncle. That was the uncle that he just talked with. And James asked his cousin, why are you warning me for Uncle Ted? That's just username. or Uncle Tom. Why are you warning me for Uncle Tom? And the cousin tells him, listen, Uncle Tom, he has been talking bad about you lately, a lot. And he's filled with anger. Now, I don't know what's wrong with that man, but I think that man is angry because you have this well-paying job at that store. You are a manager, and he's upset with it because he is unemployed and he doesn't even have any friends because the people he has contact with see how wicked his attitude is. And James was thinking, oh, thanks for warning me. And the cousin says something else. James, what you was doing, putting those pictures on Instagram and on Facebook, anytime you go out with your friends, or you go out on dates, you better stop doing that. And James asks, okay, Jude, listen, I don't know if you're aware of it, but I don't work at that store anymore. The store went bankrupt, so I had to move to another place. I have a job now, a part-time job. I don't earn that much money. I'm living with an old friend of mine, and I'm kind of pissed off right now. Excuse my language, so please don't bother me with such nonsense. If something's going on that I need to know, just speak up. Okay, the cousin says, okay, sorry. James, haven't you noticed back when you were still working at that store that lately there were fewer customers? And James said, well, yeah, I noticed it, but I didn't think we were going bankrupt. I just thought maybe people weren't buying it much in that season. And then the cousin tells him, James, that store that you worked at, it had been robbed 4 times. Large sums of money were taken away. But each of the moments that store was robbed, you either had a free day, or you were away with friends during the weekend. You didn't have to work then. Each of those 4 times, I figured out, because I've spoken to your former boss. Each of those times, it was really you that had to be there to manage the place. But because you weren't there, you weren't hurt. And 2 of the suspects that were involved in those robberies, they confessed that the only reason they came to rob that store was to have an excuse to kill you. And James was thinking, what? What are you telling me? Then the cousin continues, James, people that decided to hate you because of your success, because of your charisma, because of your prosperity, they realized that talking bad behind your back is not going to change anything about your prosperity, so they became so obsessed that they planned to kill you. And they knew you were working over there. So some of them noticed that every Thursday or in the weekends you would be often in the weekends, and on Thursdays you would be operate as a manager. So they've made their plans to attack and rob just to find you and to kill you. They didn't care about the money. The whole purpose was taking you out. Why? Those people talk bad about you behind your back with other people, but now that you continued in prosperity, they are embarrassed, they are ashamed, and they don't want to admit that they were wrong, so they want to take out their frustration upon you, so to feel relieved. And you know, your boss didn't tell you this, because you have been a faithful employee. You even worked over hours. for the company, but your boss was also targeted. He and his family were endangered by those same people. And James was thinking, whoa, 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 whoa. I never heard any of this. So when people decided not, when less customers came to the store, your boss and his wife decided they're going to close the store and move somewhere else. And then James thinks, hold on a minute. Why didn't anyone tell me any of this before? And the cousin told them, James, being empowered and having prosperity, there comes a lot with it. You cannot have any type of impact and not expect any reactions against it. And James thought, true, true. But it was then that James realized that he was protected and that losing his job at that store was a blessing in disguise. And he also realized that this college friend that he hadn't spoken with for years, he realized that this friend was also a blessing in disguise. And that James also realized that because he was now living in another town, those people were not aware where he was living, so he was safe. So what am I trying to say with these two parables? There are times that the Lord will weaken you. And if you want to think about a biblical example, look at Gideon. Gideon had an army, a large army. But the Lord told Gideon, there are way too many men with you for me to hand over the Midianites in your hands. Because if I give you victory with the aid of these many men, those men are going to boast against me. So you can read the story for yourself in the book of Judges. Gideon was left with 300 men. That's a big military disadvantage according to the world. But the Lord used that military disadvantage to give Gideon the victory. And when you think about it, if you go with a big army and the army gains victory, the men are going to claim the glory for themselves. They're going to claim the heritage for themselves, and later, after the war, there's going to be conflict about concerning who did the most, and then you'll have to deal with that also. The Lord foresaw all of these things. So the Lord weakened Gideon. I don't know your circumstances. I don't know where you're from or how far you are in the faith. Just realize this. Every believer will encounter the moment, sooner or later, that the Lord will weaken them. Just like James, in the fictional character I use in the parable, as a believer, every bad thing that happens to you is a blessing in disguise. Why? Because everything works out together for your good. But understand this, there are people that insist on empowerment, and sometimes they will get their empowerment, but it will not be God's will. And when it's not God's will, I don't care what the short-term benefits are. I don't care how precious and delightful the relief is that you're getting. If it's not God's will, that means that the devil is behind it, and that will always go wrong. Well, that being said, be at peace and remain in prayer.